Happy Sunday, everybody. Today we are looking at the Scale Trains Operator Series Tier 4 Gevos. Alright, like I said earlier this week, I have a lot to go over, and this is going to be kind of an interesting thing because I don't have anything to directly compare this to, so I have a previous released Dash 9 Operator Series, and then I have a Rivet counter, Tier 4, sitting behind it. We're going to compare and contrast some of that, but what I really think this particular engine is going after is, say, a Kato Gevo, and I don't have an actual direct comparison we can do, but we're going to talk about price point and that type of stuff as we move along here. But I have a whole bunch to say about the entirety of this engine. It's an interesting release, some of the issues I've had, some of the things I've really liked, and so this is going to be hopefully well put together. But my wife runs a daycare day-to-day, and I am struggling to find time to put together notes to properly do this, so I'm going to be a little more jumbled than I normally am, which is saying something because usually I'm very off the cuff. But bear with me. I promise this is all going to lead somewhere in the end, and hopefully it's informative and can influence you one way or the other on whether or not to purchase these while they're still available. Before we take a major zoom in, let's go ahead and talk about what this particular series is. So the operator versus rivet counter, if you are new to the Scale Trains lineup, it is not necessarily the budget option, but it is what you would call the standard option. So if you were to purchase a Kato, an older Atlas, or even some of the newer ones for that point, this is kind of the level of detail you're going to see in most of those models. The rivet counter is a step above, and the added detail you get with one of them is definitely worth the price increase, but a lot of people can't make that jump. So this is an excellent placement in the price for performance tier. We'll get to that at the very end. But let's actually look at this, talk about some of the details you do get for your money, and then we will compare it side by side with the actual rivet counter Gevo behind it here. So up front, we are pretty standard when it comes to level of quality from Scale Trains. Painted handrails and steps, which is a great thing. They're nice and consistent. They look good. The handrails are nice and thin, and it's just nice for the price point that these are looking at coming in at. Having all those details done is really a nice thing. However, something that should be noted is the snowplow, the MU hoses, and the coupler release lever are not pre-installed from the factory. That's something that I did myself. We will turn the camera slightly here and move this back, and you can kind of see them installed there. This has the standard Scale Trains coupler on it. Not a hindrance, not a plus. I'm really not a big fan of them because of the exposed springs. I'm actually reaching out to Scale Trains to see if I can get some replacement springs. I've lost several on some of my engines and pieces of rolling stock in the last few months, and I was hoping to find some of them, so hopefully they can help me out with that. I'm sure they can. I do need to mention, though, one of my patrons reached out and said he was having a heck of a time getting the added detail installed on these, and I can certainly understand why now. I did all of the added detail on my 2-9 operators that I had, and honestly, I didn't have as many problems with those as I did these. And so I don't remember the actual coupler release lever being so difficult to install. On this particular unit, I ended up just drilling out the holes a little bit, essentially just setting it in there, letting it kind of rest there, and super gluing it into place. The MU hoses and the excuse me, the snowplow are easy to install and pretty much no modification there. I glue them in place. You may or may not want to do that. I want them to be a permanent fix. If you are someone buying this and you are worried about messing up that or getting super glue everywhere, I would not add on the coupler disconnection handle. Just leave that off and then add the snowplow and MU hoses. They're really simple to install, and when I get my other engine back, I will go ahead and shoot the video for that. As we move back a little bit, you'll notice that all the hand grabs are molded in. I actually almost like this better than, say, some of my rivet counters. Because of the scale, it is difficult to get them sunk in and close enough to the body to be really realistic. I love the added detail that you get on the rivet counter, but if we're talking scale, this is probably a little bit closer. Also, you just have less to worry about when you know things getting knocked off or what have you. As you look at the front windshields, you notice there are no windshield wipers installed, as well as any of the hand grabs like you would see on the rivet counter, and there's also no antennas on the top of this cab. No sunshades on the side. Sorry about that, lost my word there. Not really the biggest deal to me. Sometimes those can end up getting broken off or what have you. I like to see them on there, but again, for the price point that this is coming in at, I definitely don't hold it against it. If you can see inside the cab there, through the front window, you definitely can. Through the side, the light is probably blocking it. But there is in-cab detail. That's really nice. If you watched my video from a while back, I will say that the lights that are on the light board for lighting up the number board tend to shine through the cab. So the plastic on these is probably a little bit thinner. I have remedied this by just painting over those lights. I would rather not have the cab glow as well as the bleed through on the body. What I have not fixed is when we get to the back, when you turn on the rear light, it is evident that it is shining through the entirety of the body. There is a lot of plastic glow. That requires a little bit of painting. Not the biggest ordeal, but I wish it wasn't the case. However, we do need to consider price point. Moving along the side of this, take a moment to look at the trucks. They are absolutely gorgeous on this model. I am glad I picked up BNSF versions of these. These silver trucks just bring out all of the detail. And I gotta tell you, they are some of the best molded trucks I've seen in a long time. The rivet counters are very similar. The BNSF rivet counters have the high traction piping and whatnot on there, and it kind of takes away from the look of these. And I gotta tell you, these are just beautifully molded, and the paint that they got on these really brings out the look. I think Scale Trains really gets this right on. Moving farther down, you'll notice very thin handrails, very nicely attached, very strongly attached, which is a super big plus for me. The dynamic, as you look up there at the top, the dynamics, the radiator fins are very nicely defined and look great on this. When it comes to the walkways, pretty much all Scale Trains have excellent little texture on there. You can see the diamond tread. It really does look nice. The real thing that you want to get into here is when you look at the body paneling here, nice deep ridges for the doors, and the paint is nice and consistent all the way through it. They really did a good job getting delivery in all the small nooks and crannies, which is awesome. Not everybody's up close and personal looking at this stuff, but it really does make it an excellent looking machine, you know, from a little ways back. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here. This has the horn attached. Everything right there looks good. But as you look at the fuel tank, notice all the little fill caps are painted red, which is nice. Not the biggest deal, but the small stuff like this that can be difficult for people with the shakes like myself, it's sure nice to have that stuff on there, and I really appreciate it. As we continue back, This is one of those areas where the rivet counter has better detail in my opinion. They actually kind of come back over it, add a little bit of gray into the louvers here. Normally these are kind of see-through, and it actually kind of adds that little bit of illusion when they do that. Not a knock on this at all. It looks beautiful. All of the the grills are nice and defined, but I do miss having that slight gray tinge that the rivet counter has on there. Not that it can't be done, but it sure does make a difference in the look. Here's going to be kind of a hot take. I actually prefer the radiator covers on this versus my rivet counters. All of the grill stuff is molded into this and has a nice flat clean look. It is a separately applied detail on all of the rivet counters, and depending on how well it was applied, they can be kind of wonky and a little bit I don't know, not smooth. And so this actually has a much better look in my opinion. Not that I don't like the added detail, I just think it's harder to get it perfect, and this just looks better in my opinion. Especially if you did a little bit of weathering on this, I think it would look super nice. As we continue back, the hand grabs are painted there on the very back wall. Not a separately applied detail, but they did hit it with some white, so that's a cool little detail. The footstep hanging off the back, and then painted handrails and footsteps. That's awesome. And then I applied the MU hoses back here and the coupler disconnect. So all in all, when you're looking at this particular model, oops, I messed up my camera there. Sorry about that. It is a well put together operator series. I think they did an awesome job with the molding on this, and I'm going to keep referencing this a lot. For the price point this is coming in at, you couldn't ask for better. I think Scale Trains knocks it out of the park with their operator stuff. They get the body molding just right, and I gotta say I appreciate it, because finding quality budget locomotives these days can be difficult, and this is definitely one of them. All right, so now we have a rivet counter right up next to this, and there is a slight difference in paint color, but we are within the margin of error, and that's actually kind of cool. I like that they have slightly different color schemes. It can, some are a little bit older, been out in the sun a little bit more, that type of thing. They're not drastically different, but they do add just a little bit of difference between your engines, so everything doesn't look completely the same. There are some minor differences that you're going to see in the body detail. There are small things, like on top, there are some little paint things that you can see. The antennas and whatnot are a little bit different. Numbered relatively close to one another, so they're going to kind of be similar engines. That's why I picked the number schemes that I did. Notice that the rivet counter on the left has the high tractive effort trucks underneath it, and they really do detract from the look of the entire engine, in my opinion. It's cool that they can get all that stuff on there, but I really like the cleaner look of the one on the right. Really, most of the major details are pretty similar. Just note, like at the front of the rivet counter, there is a separately applied entrance door. The window on it, see-through. All the lights function identically between the two. They are both equally as bright as one another. I will show you this with the light on in just a moment. But you can see the hand grabs are all separately applied on the rivet counter. Honestly, you take a couple steps back, you can tell that the one on the left is probably a little higher quality, but to the average person who doesn't look at these every day like I do, they could pass muster, run alongside each other, and you probably wouldn't have anybody go, oh, that one doesn't belong with the other. So let's go ahead and pull the rivet counter off, and we're going to pull another operator, the -9, down, just to kind of see that the quality is about the same between the two. If you haven't gone back and checked out the Scale Trains operator -9 review that I did, really take a minute to go back and check it out. It is worth listening to. this is 100% the value king back in the day. You could get these things DCC installed for about $125, and these are similar to that in price. And I would imagine the next release of these, they're probably going to be right on top of each other for price. I had nothing but glowing things to say about the Dash 9s, and as you can see, the quality has not changed. They still have really nice trucks, side to side. When we get to the electronics, I'm going to reference this one just a little bit and then compare it to this because they are running the exact same type of decoder, so that's going to be important. But all of the features that you would see on the older operator are still on the new one, and nothing has changed. And then, yeah, if you go back and check out the video for the Dash 9, I go over all of that. It has been a workhorse on my layout, and I've had many a fun hour with the Dash 9, and I am similar. I have some things to say, but this particular operator has been awesome too. So I have spent a little bit of time in the lock programmer making some minor adjustments on this, and then if you caught my video a couple weeks back about some of the issues that I ran into with these, we're going to start getting into that. But before we do that, I just wanted to talk about the lights. I am going to turn off my extra lights here just so we can get a bit of a visual. Ditch lights can be difficult to see under studio lighting, but they do function, and the headlight is absolutely acceptable. I currently do not have this one set up to auto dim at stop. I plan on using these as non-lead engines in the future. They are going to be a distributed power. I did make some changes. I like to go back in and change all of your Locksound locomotives and Lock Pilot locomotives that you get from scale trains are going to be set up to run with one another nowadays. And function 6 is the ditch lights. I prefer to change that on everything, so all of my locomotives are the same, to function 7. There are some things that interferes with, and I will talk about that, but one thing that I will say, you can easily adjust these so they have auto dim. However, you pretty well need to either use JMRI or your lock programmer. I have difficulty with ESU changing simple settings through CVs. It's just one of those things. So if you get these, keep that in mind, that adjusting some of these things can be difficult, and a lock programmer is necessary to do most of that stuff. Lights aside, let's go ahead and talk decoders. Now, I ended up sending back 3787. It was the sister engine that I purchased with this one. I planned on running them in consist. I planned on testing them together. However, as of Sunday night this week, I believe, I was running them on the layout and system shut down, so I assumed something derailed somewhere, and after farting around a little bit, I realized that a decoder had failed. And after checking all my locomotives, 3787, the decoder had essentially shorted, and I believe that particular instance is because of the motor. I had suspected that the motor had issues. It was making extra noise. Some people had mentioned that it was kind of standard for some motors to be loud. I disagree. All of my other scale trains engines have really nice quiet running drive mechanisms. This one was almost twice as loud. And before I had this fail, I had done a bunch of testing and thought maybe I had come up with the problem. I had been playing with the back EMF and then the frequency in which the voltage is modulated to the motor. If anyone has used older decoders, you will know that motor hum is kind of a thing. Newer decoders have a faster refresh rate, the hertz in which they modulate the voltage to the motor, And essentially what you're doing is they're trying to modulate that voltage up, or excuse me, modulate that up high enough that it is not audible to the ear. I played with all those settings. I thought maybe something was wrong there. I tried swapping the decoder between the two of these, and it stayed with the engine. So I was starting to wonder if it was some sort of wiring issue, like a pinched wire like this particular engine had. And so I started to trace it a little bit, and I couldn't necessarily find anything with high resistance as I was probing around with my multimeter. At this point in time, I was still using my DCS51 with a 500 milliamp power source. So before anyone says it was my ESU system, I'm still using my DCS51 with a very low power supply. I put everything back together, and I had been running it for about 3 hours on the layout in consist with this, and it failed. A indication that this was happening was, before that, I noticed it was starting to come out of speed match with this one. I ended up having to bump up my CVs quite a bit to get it to run with this. It was lagging behind. That's an indicator that something in the motor is starting to die. I own 12 Scale Trains engines at this current time. Other than that one, I have 11 others, and every one of them uses exactly the same CV settings, and they are all within speed match with one another. This particular one was not. So if you own a bunch of other Scale Trains engines, you probably already know this, but something to be said when using quality decoders and quality engines, if you have to drastically change your CV2, 6, and 5, or if you're using a speed curve to change or to get your engines to speed match properly, there's probably something else wrong. I went through and I checked the drivetrain. Everything was properly, it moved freely and whatnot, and after the fact it failed. I went ahead and I have a couple of extra version 4 Lock Pilot Next 18 decoders. I popped it in there and it went back to working. I reached out to Scale Trains, and they got back to me promptly. They offered me a shipping label, and I sent it back off. They did send me a 2-day shipping label. I was crossing my fingers that I would get it back on time to do this review, but I do live in a very rural part of Montana, and I think it's just going to be a bit longer. So unfortunately, I don't have it here to compare against this one. Not a good thing that the engine failed right off the bat, but it is a testament to the manufacturer when they are timely responding to you, offer to pay the shipping back when something you purchase from them doesn't work, and they're very polite and courteous, and in their email, I'm not a novice user. I provided a lot of extra information, and they obviously must have understood that and responded in kind. I understand sometimes you deal with people that don't necessarily know the hobby. I filled them in with all the information, and they didn't ask any questions. They went, yep, you're absolutely right. Here's this, and they got me going. So I appreciate that. It's nice that there are some other companies out there that can be a little condescending to you when you are describing your problems. And I understand when you work in the customer service industry, I'm in front of people a lot all the time as well. At my job, I understand that it can be difficult, but I do appreciate when they are kind to you and respect the information that they give you. So take that into consideration. It is one of those reasons why I really like working with Broadway. When I buy their engines and I have an issue, they're always really on point. And now I have had a couple issues with some Scale Trains engines, and they've always been timely, they've been polite, and offered to take care of me, and that is what you should see from a manufacturer. It doesn't matter how good their product is, if they don't take care of it at the end, that can really push your customer base away. So, glowing review for Scale Trains themselves. They have really taken care of me, and I appreciate that they do that. So, if that helps you make a purchase, it should, and just saying that they're a great a great company to buy your product from. These were in fact bought directly from them. I did not go through Lombard or another manufacturer, or another reseller for that matter. I try to get everything from Lombard. I really like working with them. I started pre-ordering some of my locomotives from Scale Trains a while ago, and I saw these. These must have missed my my attention, but I saw these come up and I ordered them right away just so we could get a review in. Now, the engine that I had issues with aside, we need to talk about this one. There was a small bit of issue with this. This had a pinched wire. I just went through and fixed it. I'm sure Scale Trains would work with you. I have soldering irons, all that kind of stuff. It really wasn't that big a deal for me, so I took care of it. This is a great host for a sound system should you want to do that in the future. However, I would urge you not to do that unless it is something you really want to work into in the future. If we're talking price point on this, these engines, DCC ready, are at $100 shipped, which is an awesome value. But if you're going to put a sound system in this, the cheapest you're going to find is a lock sound from, I want to say Lombard has them the cheapest for like $92. And if that's all you're buying, you got to pay a little bit of shipping on it. So you're right about $100. And then finding a speaker for one of these can be difficult, but they're probably about $10. So you're looking at a $210 sound equipped engine. And right now you can buy a Rivet counter with sound on it for $232 on Lombard. And for that kind of price difference, I wouldn't bother doing the sound install. I would just go straight to the Rivet counter and have everything pre-installed, and you wouldn't need a lock programmer to do that. So that is a big consideration when you're looking at these. If you ever are considering sound, it would probably be to your benefit to hold off, save a little bit of money, and go for a Rivet counter. Now, if we're talking simply DC or DCC, this is where these engines really come into the conversation, because $100 shipped on the Scale Trains website, $134 for a DCC unit. These come with ESU Lock Pilot version 5s, excellent decoders, back EMF, relatively easy to program and easy to get speed matched with things. They're snappy when you are doing standard CV changes on, say, your layout on a programming track. And frankly, they are normally, under most situations, very quiet running decoders. That other engine is a different story, but like this one, it is a very quiet running engine. I hope if you watch the pre-review run, I tried to get up close enough so that you could hear this compared to those SD70 ACEs from Cato. They actually have a slightly louder drivetrain than this one does, all said and done. And that's saying something. Those Catos are relatively quiet. This thing has a very silent running gear train. So that is very much appreciated. That is something that I love. I don't like to listen to squeaking, grinding, or the wah, 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 wah noise you get from some of the motors. I like my trains to be seen and not heard, unless you want them to be heard with your sound decoders. $135 with the DCC board is absolutely a great price. Most places online you can find a Lock Pilot version 4 for about $30 and a version 5 for about $32 to $35. So really, if you purchased a DC unit and you wanted to go in later and put a decoder on it, it's a cheap upgrade. However, I love that they don't mark up anything decoder installed. I see some places like Cato's, they charge a little bit extra for decoder installation, and frankly that kind of sucks because it's really easy to put one in a Cato. And so I always, in those circumstances, recommend buying them separately. In this particular situation, there's no markup. If you want to do DCC, just buy the DCC equipped one. You're not spending any extra money, so that is an awesome value for the end user. It also makes everything easier. Please go back and look at my my Empty Wallet Wednesday video where I went over these. Decoders are super easy to install. Next 18 can be slightly finicky getting installed. The body comes off of these really easy, which is nice. Sometimes you have to kind of wiggle waggle on a Kato body. You just remove the couplers on these and the body comes right off. That next 18 decoder, you do have to make sure it is seated properly. You can't get it in there backwards. They come wrapped from the factory with Kapton tape. I still add the piece of foam underneath there just for a little added insurance. It doesn't really cause any problems anywhere, and I have had my Dash 8s have those decoders come a little bit loose every now and then if I didn't have that piece of foam in there. I'm not sure if it's from vibration or what, but gravity is working against it. Other than that, I do have some minor considerations that I wanted to talk about. The absolute slow speed performance of this model is excellent. It runs just as good as a Rivet counter. They do absolutely run one tie at a time, and that's a cool thing. They do really good at slow speed. I did end up having to go in and reset both of my decoders. I noticed that they were a little bit choppy. So my usual settings for my scale trains engines are a CV value of 3 for CV2. For CV6, I change it from 88 to 80. And then CV5 a lot of times is set for 255. I like to slow that down and set it at 160. When I did that on both of these engines, I noticed that, and I tried to catch this in my video as well, that there is kind of a point somewhere, and I'm not sure where it is because I'm on my, I was doing my DCS 51 at this point in time. It would kind of just make a jump to the next speed step, and you can see that kind of where I'm starting to make the engine take off. I put all my settings back to where they came from the factory, and I think I may have found where it was in the lock programmer. But you can see it kind of just jumps to the next speed step. What I did is a factory reset on both of my units before I sent that other one back. And all you need to do is, there is, for some reason, if you select the custom speed curve and then deselect it, well, I should, excuse me, you select the custom speed curve, you send it to decoder, and then go back to the standard CV26, just the, you know, the standard speed matching setup, and send that back to the decoder. All those issues went away. I don't know why. It just, for some reason, it was some sort of weird setting that got set up. From the factory, though, this does have some interesting things that you can do. One of the awesome things that the ESU systems you get from scale trains is the DPU mode. So if you press function 5, and I had to do some custom messing around because it messes with the ditch lights, whether the engine is going forward or reverse, whatever light is to the rear is set in dim. So it's just like running prototypical engines. If you had this at the back of a train running DPU, the very rear light would be running at dim. And so that's a really cool feature. Also from the factory, these have fixed a problem that I had on my version 4s. And this might be something you run into, unfortunately, if you're adding your own DCC board to this. If you don't have a lock programmer, function 9 needs to be set to full throttle. Now, I don't know how you can do this from JMRI. It's really easy inside the lock programmer, but these came factory equipped with DCC and had the drive hold on function 9 already set up. For those of you who don't know, what that allows you to do is, in consist with an engine that has sound, if you activate function 9 for the entire consist and you turn the throttle up, the engines that have sound will spool up alongside it. However, none of the speed will change. Previously, without that option installed on these from the factory, if you were to put this in consist with any of your sound engines, engage that, this would try to run away as you turn the throttle up. So nice that they caught that on these lock pilots. I really appreciate that being installed. That's a lot of added value for the guy that might not have a lock programmer and wants to use this with some of his sound locomotives that have that drive hold functionality. Really, that's about all I have to talk about when it comes to the electronics. really am enamored with how well these things run after I've done a little bit of tweaking. I'm definitely going to hang on to this particular engine. I have yet to decide if I am going to go ahead and sell 3787 when I get it back. I plan on running it a little bit more just to see if the issue went away and it was a one-off problem. I will provide an update at some point. But honestly, I'm pretty impressed with the engine that I have that did work properly, and I gotta say, Scale Trains really did treat me well. So let's talk price point and why that makes this so important. These outclass Katos in a lot of ways, and they are priced about the same. Now, if you are buying newer Katos and you find the right places, you can find them for about $90. Now, this particular engine comes in at $100, and you get a little bit extra here and there when it comes to some of the details, and honestly, the overall of this engine is a little bit nicer than a Kato, to be quite honest with you. So absolutely worth that $100. Now, when we start talking DCC, ESU doesn't have a good drop-in Kato decoder that isn't sound as of yet. So when that becomes a thing, that might change this. But currently, I can only recommend TCS decoders for most of my Katos. So you're looking at adding $45 to $50 to a $90 engine. So you're at $135. You're at exactly the same price point as this, and really you get more for your money with this particular engine. Now, I realize that Kato only has a standard Gevo, and this is a Tier 4 Gevo, so they're two different things, and you probably want both on your layout at some point. But keep in mind that the Fox Valley model that we did last week directly kind of competes with this at some point. And with those coming from Scale Trains in the future, and me thinking that they're kind of be the in-between, now we have something to talk about, because we will have, you know, a Dash 9, a Gevo, and a Tier 4 Gevo, all coming from, you know, Scale Trains. I'm guessing that they may or may not have the two options in that Fox Valley model, one with the added detail installed and one without, and I bet you that they kind of line up with these price points. So this is kind of an interesting thing. I'm seeing a lot of innovation in the industry, and this is cool. These come in priced better than Katos for the most part, ready from the factory, and just function flawlessly for the most part. And honestly, Kato kind of needs to redo some of their frames. Now, the DCC ready Katos are awesome. I've got a bunch of them, but none of them are easily sound, you know, installed. Now, some of the Aces, whatnot, have enough space to get a speaker installed, but they ain't as easy as putting one in this. Or look at Atlas. They are absolutely killing it. Their speakers are so easy. I mean, most of them come with them installed now, but I love this. I love that the industry is now kind of fighting for your dollar. We're getting good price points again, and it's just an exciting time to be in the N scale, because there is a lot of good stuff on the horizon. So a long review. I had a lot to say about this. Couple of notes, too long, didn't listen. Scale Trains is treating me good. I had an issue with an engine. They took care of it, and they were very polite in doing so. That's awesome. Gotta love that. Go support Scale Trains, because they support the people that actually run their engines. 2, this thing runs great. It looks great, and it's nice and strong. I forgot to mention, sometimes not having detail on there makes them easier to handle. That sure makes this one easier to handle. That's kind of nice for a guy like me that has stuff on and off his layout a lot. Price point's awesome. Go out and buy a couple of them. If you don't have any Gevos, and especially if you're a BNSF guy and you need a bunch of Gevos to fill out your roster, get some of these. You're not going to go wrong, other than if you're thinking about sound. Keep that in mind. But these operator Gevos have been great. I think you should definitely have a couple on your layout. All right, everybody, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it, and have a good rest of your weekend. Bye now.